Hello everybody and welcome back to Uncovering Inventory Systems. Maybe you didn't notice, but I'm an owl. Look at this sick VTuber avatar my wife hand drew and rigged this thing. I'm still gonna use like my face, but like for now, look at this thing, it's sick. Okay, on the last episode, grab it, comment. We got the function to adding inventory items complete. It's not fully complete. We're gonna have to check for stacks and things of that nature, but for now it is good to go. So today let's start working on a widget that can display the items that get added to the inventory. Obviously, eventually we need to remove items as well, but for now let's get a visual of whatever's in the inventory. I'm gonna hit Control Space. I'm gonna go to my BPs folder. And we're going to create a new folder, and we're actually just going to call this widgets, and I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go ahead and right click because we actually need to set up a overhead system for our HUD and all of our widgets. So actually, before we open up widgets, let's go into systems, and we are going to right click. I'm going to go to blueprint class, and then here at the bottom, I'm going to type in HUD, and we're going to click on just HUD and hit select. I'm going to name this HUD underscore, and then usually the name of the game. But in this case, since I don't have a name for my game, I'm just going to call it HUD inventory. However, you know what? I'm not going to do that, and here's why. I'm scared people will think that I'm naming it HUD underscore what it's for. That's not the case. So HUD game. Okay, so this is the HUD for our game. In fact, HUD game name. Perfect. Control-Shift-S. And then in order to use this, we need a game mode. So I'm also going to right click, go to blueprint class, and then you'll see we have a game mode base. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to name this GMB for game mode base underscore game name, Control-Shift-S. And I'm going to open up the GMB game name. GMB game name is honestly going to be mostly empty. What we mostly want is over here on the right hand side under classes. We have the game session, state, player controller, yada yada yada. We need to take the HUD class and we need to set this to the HUD we created. For now, go ahead and leave the rest as default. Unless you have specific things already, like for example, default pawn class, I'm using the first person character, so I could set that there. But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and hit compile and save. I'm gonna exit out of the GMB and I'm gonna go over to my map because what I need access to now is I need the world settings. If yours isn't here, just go up here to the Windows tab at the top left and you'll go down and select world settings. Mine's over here on the right hand side, so I'm gonna shrink my details for a moment and I'm gonna open up the selected game mode. And you'll see that right now we've got it set to game mode override and it's using that first person game mode. This is the one that's made by default. So we're going to open that and we're going to just change this over to GMB game name. And you'll see that a lot of these will remain the same. However, our HUD class was updated and obviously I switched it over to the first person character. Oh yeah, up here at the top. Control-Shift-S. Okay, now we can go back to actually working with the, if we go back to our blueprints folder, the widgets folder. I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to go up to a user interface and we want a widget blueprint. Just click on user widget at the top and I'm going to use W as my naming convention for widgets. So I'm going to do a W underscore HUD underscore game name, Control-Shift-S. And for now, we're going to leave this empty. I lied. Open it up. We are going to add one thing to it. In the palette, we're going to add a canvas. So let's go ahead and compile and save. And for those that have never worked with widgets, just know that the canvas is essentially a way of saying, hey, this is going to be the thing that is going to contain my widgets. That's not entirely true, but the canvas is kind of like the screen, and you can place things on the canvas if you want them to appear there. Imagine this as like your workspace, and you're going to add your widgets to the screen so you know what it looks like. I hope that makes sense. So now we'll go ahead and close the HUD, and instead we're going to go back to our content drawer, and we are going to right click. we are going to make a new folder. We're going to name this inventory, and we are going to open that up. This is going to be hard to explain if you've never worked with widgets, and I'm going to do my absolute best, but understand that any confusion or complication that comes up, it's probably expected if you're new to this, so don't panic. Essentially, we need an inventory container, and then we need individual elements to put into the inventory. Let's just jump straight in so you can get a better understanding. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to user interface and create a widget blueprint. We're just going to click user widget. We're going to use W underscore. I'm going to call this inventory container. Control Shift S, and I'm going to open this up. Now, the first thing we need to do on this is at the top right, you'll see that currently it's set to fill screen, okay? So what this is gonna do, if I was to drag something out onto here, the size is not going to reflect its actual size because it's going to fill the screen. So instead, go over here and hit this drop-down menu, and we're gonna go to desired. So what that's gonna do is when we start working with this element, it is going to be the size we set it to instead of it trying to guess and figure it out. And just for the sake of it, Control Shift S and compile. When you're working with something that you need to have control of the size of, for example, an inventory window, the first thing you want to add is something called a size box. So we're going to drag this on. And you'll note, look how small it is. That's because right now its desired is, as you can see, everything's set to 0. So what we need to do is, actually, let's do this in the correct order. Let's change the name. So this is going to be size box. I'm going to get rid of the number. I'm going to leave the underscore. And I'm going to put inventory container. Okay. And now we need to just have a size. Honestly, the size can be dependent on what you need. So do whatever. However, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click width and height override. And I'm going to set them both to 300 for right now. And we'll just get like a perfect square. For those that are interested, the minimum and maximum is here in case you want your inventory to adapt to the player's screen. So for example, maybe they can adjust the size and you want it to be within a certain constraint, or you want it to automatically adapt to their screen size. That's what like minimum and maximum are going to be used for. For the sake of this beginner tutorial, we are not going to be messing with that, but that is what those are for. Okay, so we have a size box, and if you click out of it, you'll notice it doesn't actually have a visual. This grid is nothing more than an indicator for us. The next thing we need to add is something called an overlay. So I'm going to go ahead and type in overlay, and I'm going to make this a child of the size box. So a size box can only have one child. It lives in a country where that's the law. So what we do is we put the next major item that's going to contain it all as the child of the size box. In this case, it is an overlay because what an overlay allows us to do is have objects be on top of each other. By default, widgets will not allow their components to overlay. They all take up their own space and it refuses to let them overlap unless they're children of children, but we're not going to get too complicated right now. So the overlay is simply allowing us to put objects on top of objects. Okay, let's go ahead and erase overlay from the search, and instead we're going to grab an image and we're going to make the image a child of overlay. Let's change the name from 28 to background. And now what do we do with this box? Because as you can see, we don't have a way to size this image. Well, we're going to be using this purely as a gray box for the background. So what we're going to do is instead use the alignment here. We can put it on the left, we can put it at the top, middle, right, bottom. But if you use the far right ones, it'll fill and fill. So now we've got a widget with a background that is really, really white. It's making me whiter in real life. I'm not a fan. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this little color and opacity here, and we're going to drop this. This is why it's called gray boxing, by the way. We're going to go pretty dark. So I'm going to put mine about here, and I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Now, this is where things would become a problem if we didn't have an overlay. See, if we didn't have an overlay, the image is now taking up the entire size box. So that's it. GG. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And however, because we have the size box, we can do interesting things like I'm actually going to add another image, and it's not going to be a child of image background. It's actually going to be of overlay again. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and we're going to change its name from 191. I'm blanking on what this is called. I don't know if this is the right name, I forget, but I'm just gonna say header. And on this one, I'm not gonna do fill vertical, but I am gonna do fill horizontal. And we are going to change its color to also be a lot darker, but it's gonna be a bit brighter than the bottom. So this is kind of gonna be like the background, and then we'll have the header here, which we can put like the name, like inventory, and then like a button. Speaking of button, let's go ahead and get it placed. We'll go up to the top. And in this case, what I want to do, we are going to use a size box, and we're going to put it as a child of the overlay. Again, it's going to be nothing because we haven't set a size. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a width and a height, and we are going to set both of those to, I really don't know yet, so we'll just do 30 by 30. That actually looks pretty decent. We're going to do 25 by 25 though, and you'll see why in a moment. And what we're going to do is, instead of using the fill options on alignment, we're actually going to use the right alignment and the top alignment. And what you're going to see is it puts it up here in the very top right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some padding. For those that don't know what padding does, let me press 5 and hit enter. And what you'll see is what it did is it said, I don't want you within 5 pixels of the right and 5 pixels of the top. However, that's not quite center. As you can see now, we're kind of near the bottom edge. So we're going to drop this down a little bit to like, let's try 3. A little closer, but it looks like 4 might be where we want to go. There we go. 4 doesn't look too bad at all. And then within the size box, I'm going to search for a button and make it a child of that size box. Something I forgot to do, I apologize, is let's go back to the size box and rename this exit button. And then let's click on the new button we just added and rename it from 112 to exit. And we'll hit compile and save just to make sure we're keeping everything good. Also, I should just let everyone know I'm not an expert when it comes to widgets. If I'm doing something silly, I really encourage someone in the comments below to not just make fun of me and say that I'm doing something wrong. But if you genuinely do have advice or something better than what I'm doing, feel free to share it in the comments section below. Now, what honestly I would do with the button exit is I would probably just put an image here, like one of those really good images you can get like off Google image search. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some text and I'm going to add it to the button. So we'll make it a child of the button. And as you'll see, it does not fit because it is very large right now. We're going to go ahead and just make it fill and fill. We are going to remove the padding. And then for the text, I'm just going to remove text blocks and just put an X in there, like a capital X, and press enter. And what I'm going to have to do, first off, the justification needs to be centered. Then we're going to go up to font, because there's where we can change like the size. And we're going to make this like, what's like 12 look like? 12 looks a lot better, but not quite there yet. What about 16? 16's not bad. It isn't centered, but it's fine. Like I said, I would probably use an image for this anyway. So I'm hoping everything is making sense so far. Hi, it's me from the future. We don't want a vertical box. Don't do a vertical box. Do everything that I'm about to tell you to do, but don't do it with a vertical box. We're going to do it with a uniform grid panel. We'll just take it, add it to the overlay, and then do exactly the same thing. And yeah, Now we're going to add something known as a uniform grid panel. I'm going to add a vertical box. So do you remember how I said by default, which by the way, this goes as a child of the overlay, but by default, widgets do not allow their components to overlap? Well, a vertical box basically says, in that context, I'm going to make sure that they are lined vertically, because by default, they are lined up from top left to bottom right, horizontal first. With a vertical box, it says, I don't really care what you want, you're going to be lined up vertically. This is, I will say, warning right now, okay? This is a situation where I'm going to do something that might not be how you're supposed to do it, and I accept that. But it will work, and I encourage someone that knows how to deal with this to leave a comment. So we're going to take the vertical box and we're going to make the horizontal alignment fill and fill. However, you'll notice it covers our header here. And this is the part where I think I'm doing something wrong, and I think I would love some advice on this. We're actually going to add some padding to just bring this down, so that way it isn't covering the header. And I'm pretty sure there's got to be a better way to do this. But regardless, you're probably wondering how we do that, because if I made this 30, the whole thing goes inside. But what's cool is if you add multiple numbers, it knows to do it in a clockwise fashion. So if I do 30, comma, 0, comma, 0, comma, 0, and press enter, you'll notice that it took the left side, moved it over, and then the rest stayed the same. So if we know that it's clockwise, then we know that we actually need to take the 30 and make it the second number. So we'll remove the 30, and for the second number, we'll put the 30 there instead. And there we go. It brought it down. It does need to come down just a little bit more though. So we'll do like 32. Perfect. 32 is exactly what I was looking for. And now we'll hit compile and save. Thank God editing exists. All right, so we're gonna hit compile and save with the uniform grid panel. And let's talk about what the uniform grid panel is gonna do for us. The uniform grid panel is going to take in children, and it's gonna uniformly line them up. It'll be like, you here, you here, you here, you here, you here. You know, kind of like an inventory. However, we don't have anything to fill this up with yet. So this does not have full functionality yet, but for now, oh, one last thing, go to uniform grid panel, I apologize. Go ahead and just like erase 182, put inventory, and then you want this to be a variable. Check this, this has to be checked. Compile and save. Now, this doesn't have full functionality, but we're gonna come back to that. Let's go ahead and create what the elements inside the grid panel are going to look like. I'm gonna open up my drawer here. I'm gonna right click, we are going to go to user interface, widget blueprint. We need a user widget. We're gonna press W underscore, and so we have the inventory container. Let's do an inventory slot, like that, Control Shift S, and we'll open it up. If you've been following along closely, you'll remember the first thing we need to do is change this from fill screen to desired. And this is where the parent to child relationship is really going to shine. We're going to, first, we'll do a size box, bring that down. Size box is nothing because we haven't done anything yet. We're going to change it from size box 22 to size box slot. We're going to make a width and a height. Inventories look better in my opinion whenever the height is a little bit more than the width. So we have about 300 pixels to deal with in the inventory. I always suck at this, so if I'm wrong off the bat, I'm sorry. We made a 300 by 300, so we type in 300. Let's say we want 5 slots, so we'll divide by 5. And let's say we want a padding of another 5, or 2.5 on each side, so minus 2.5. So we need 57.5 pixels on width. I didn't really explain why I did that. I hope it was followable. It's so we can get a proper amount of slots in the inventory that looks correct and still have a little padding. So I'm looking at 57.5 on my width. Kind of zoom in on it a little bit. And then I like the height to be a little bit more. So instead of 5, we'll do 4. So if we have 300. What's the padding we used? It was like, let's go check. This header was 32 pixels, so we need to take that into consideration. So let's subtract the header, and we're at 268 pixels, and we want this to hold 4 slots. So we'll divide it by 4, which gives us 67. However, we want a padding of 2.5, so we'll do like minus 2.5. So we're at like 64.5. So it's a little bit more than the 57.5. So that was what 64.5. So our height will do 64.5, and now it's got a little bit taller than it is wide. And actually it gets more complicated than that, and that's what sucks about widgets. It is a lot of math. The reason it gets more complicated is because technically right now we'll have 0 padding between items. Each item is going to be touching each other, and you actually probably want some padding between those as well. You don't have to do all the math ahead of time. You can actually just throw shit at the wall and keep testing until it looks decent. But doing the math early is probably for the best. All right, so in this case, yeah, well, do we want an overlay? I actually don't think we need an overlay. No, you know what, we do because of the background. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're gonna add an overlay. We'll take an overlay, make that a child of the size box. The overlay is going to be fill. It's already set to fill, which is good. We're gonna do an image. Put that into the overlay. We're gonna rename that from 17 to background. So that does need to fill as well. And I'm actually gonna make these a little brighter than the background, just simply so they stick out. Now we basically just design what we want the inventory to look like. This is where you're gonna add your art, you're gonna add all your information. So if we go back to just an example, like our parent weapon, you'll see that we have damage, attack speed, durability, type, item name, and thumbnail. For the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to do a thumbnail and an item name. If you want to add more information, you will simply be able to do that by following along and then just adjusting what your thumbnail or your slot looks like. So we're going to do a thumbnail and an item name. So we need an additional image. Actually, we're not going to do an image. We're going to do a vertical box. And thankfully, due to the error earlier, you know what a vertical box does now. So we are going to take this vertical box and we are going to make it fill. Now I want an image because we want it to be on top. Make that a child of the vertical box. You'll see it immediately gives the top half to the image, the bottom half to whatever else we're going to add. However, I think it would look better if the image took up most and then there was just a name at the bottom. So I'm going to click on image. We're going to change the name to item thumbnail. So in order for this to take up more space, right now, if you look at size, it's set to auto. So in a way, it's allowing the vertical box to tell it its size. But if we go to fill, you'll notice that it's saying, no, I want you to fill whatever space you have available to you. But we don't want that. What we want is to take some text and put it at the bottom. So I'm going to type in text and I'm going to make it a child of the vertical box. And you'll notice that now the text block is taking up a ton of space. This is because the text box is going to be determined by its font size. Well, if it's set to auto, it will be determined by its font size. If it's set to fill, just like the image, as you'll see, it'll take up half and half. But we're going to go to auto with the text size. And we're going to go to font if yours isn't open. And we're going to go to size, and I'm going to set this to like 8. And then what I'll do is I want it to be centered and centered. And then just to make it look a little bit better, I'm going to go back to the image and we're going to give it like a padding of like 1. And what that does is it allows the image, the background image to appear around the image. Basically, if you were doing art though, like let's say you've got some arts or some assets, is you want the image to actually be on top as a PNG, and then the image would be behind the PNG. But we kind of replicate that by adding padding, and you'll see that it's because now we have a little bit of an edge around the image. So I'm going to go ahead and click on text block. First thing I'm going to do is change the 83 over to item name, and then you want this to be is variable. And go back to your thumbnail, and this also needs to be is variable if it's not already set. And that looks pretty good. Something some people will do, like I'm leaving this text block, or I was, but I'll show you what other people do, is they'll do underscore ph for placeholder and then underscore like item name. So that way when you're looking at it, you know what this is. And I will say, one thing I'm noticing that will be an issue is the size of this text is unfortunately going to cause issues with going off of the panel. One thing we can do to fix this is on justification. So if you close font and color and opacity, justification, you can center it. It'll help, but it is something you're going to need to take into consideration whenever you are making items. Again, I'm not a professional at widgets. I'm doing my best though, because I understand the logic. I just don't understand the artistic, like, visual side. Pile and save. And now what we need to do is we need to go into the graph. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that we have image background, thumbnail, and item name. This is everything that's set as a variable in our designer. Whenever we clicked on text block and we hit is variable, that is why it's appearing here. So anytime one of these is created, what we're going to need to do is set up a function that updates the image and name on the item slot. Like for example, if it's empty, it might say none or it might not say anything. Or if it's, for example, our dagger, it needs to pass the thumbnail over and its item name. Are you seeing again why parent to child relationships are so important? This episode's gonna go really long if I don't end here. So I'm gonna end it with both of our widgets being ready to go for the next episode. And if you want, see if you can figure out how to fill up this cube grid in the meantime. But for now, thank you guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.